Hey, this is James Miller for VFX Nomad, and we're continuing our introduction to Clarisse. Here we're going to start looking at materials, so we're going to bring some in and keep building up our scene. So at the moment we have our original geometry that we've brought in, and we've laid it out in a way that we are happy with, or going to be happy with. So the next part is that we want to make some basic materials that we can apply to these particular objects. So I'm just going to make a few diffuse shaders to begin with. Actually, I should stick this in a folder to keep everything neat. So F2, wait, there we go, materials. All right, diffuse, I'm gonna drop it in here. And then let's call this red. All right, now we'll go green and blue. All right, cool. So, before we're going to be able to do anything, we're going to need to look at something. So let us create an image. All right. We can look at it over here, but currently we're not seeing anything because we haven't made any layers and we haven't added these things. But we'll get to that in just a second. Actually, let's do it now. So red, green, and blue, we've made an image and now we want to create a layer. So we're going to say new 3D layer. This layer, if we look at it, is going to have a few things that it needs. It's going to say, I need a camera. I need to look at something. So fair enough, we're just going to make a camera. And then if we go back and we look at this layer again, it says, well, let's plug in said camera, right? The next thing it says, I need a renderer. So the renderer here is, so path tracer is the new one, ray tracer is for the legacy stuff. So here we're just going to make a path tracer and we're going to plug that in. All right, and apply. Now it's beginning to render something. It's all black because we're probably inside something. If you remember at the very beginning, we said we can drag and we can drop into the eye socket. And here that we see, if we press F, we can see that we were inside the duck. So here, let's focus on the tub, press F, tumble around. So that's Alt, left, middle, right click. And here we go, we're looking at the tub. Image view, here we go. Now everything is black because A, we don't have any materials on anything, and B, we have no lights. I'm gonna make another folder and I'm just gonna call it lights. And here we can just put whatever it is that you like the look of, but I'm just gonna make an environment light. So that just means lights from all directions. And this is what we get. Now, we are looking at the combiners here, okay? So earlier when we were looking at just the bits of geo in the scene, you could have dragged and dropped these things onto the particular objects. Now, this isn't working with the combiners, okay? So I'm grabbing the red, I'm trying to drop it on there. It's not really doing anything. So let's just make it red. Okay. But there's a different way that we can do this. We can either go in and apply this red, green, and blue to the original geometry down here. That is an option. But what that means is that every time we, let's say, make a duck, the duck will always have the same texture on it, will always have the same shader, which a lot of the time we don't want to do if we can have instances around the scene. So what we could do here, this is the second way to apply materials, is we can add them, we can just make it a material override. So we're going to go red. And then if we zoom in, you can see our duck is red. So let's actually put these ducks next to each other so it's a little bit clearer. Sorry, I'm still looking through the camera. So let's take this off. Okay, there's duck number 2. Put them on the surface, and then duck number 3. You can go here. Okay, so 1, 2, 3. Look at our image view. Zoom back a little bit. All right, it's a different mouse. There we go. Okay, everything's cooking. Good stuff. Number 1 has a red material on it. Number 2, I don't think I've actually made this green yet, but okay. So we have red, green, and blue. So let's make the green green. Let's make the blue blue. All right, nice. So let's zoom out a little bit more. So there, you can see now that we've applied 3 different shaders to the 3 different combiners. This might be a little confusing at first, but we'll get into it more as you go along. But what it's in essence allowed you to do is decide per combiner or null or whatever you want to refer to it as, what it is that the ducks are going to pick up in this particular instance. Already you can see that that's quite a powerful way to assign things. We'll go over the third way of assigning things quite quickly, just so you know it exists. It's a little bit confusing, especially if you're new to writing paths to objects within the scene. But what you would do is this: you have a shading layer editor. So far, we don't have a shading layer. So a shading layer is in essence a sheet which gives a bunch of rules. Okay, so I'm making a shading layer. I need to tell the layer to read the shading layer. This is only if you want to do this. You can continue to do things just using the overrides or drag and dropping things. That is also allowed. But the shading layer, what it does is sets rules. So this is it right here. Okay, it's blank. It's not really got anything. So we say add. If I was to click a star, that means everything. And then I give it a material. I say blue. Now everything in the scene is going to be blue. All right. So how is that useful to us here? If we make 3 of these, by the way, it's a bit weird, but the shading layer trumps the override, which in my mind doesn't really make the most sense, but that is just how it works. So we have red, green, and blue shaders. And we have duck 1, 2, and 3. So that's going to be pretty easy. So we're going to say anywhere you see something called duck 1, make it blue. Anywhere you see duck 2. Okay, so I'm just doing star, which means anywhere, duck 2, which is the name, and then anywhere. And then we're going to make that one green. And then I'm going to say duck 3. We're going to say red. So that means we know from this that duck 1 is the blue one, duck 2 is the green, etc. So this is the third way that you can assign stuff. So the first way is you drag and drop something onto it. So you're using the material linker. This is best if you're going to assign something to the original geometry. You can use this on here. If you look, you'll see the switch over as I click on different things. So I'm on one thing here. I can select whatever that is, 5 things here. And it's saying you have 5 things. What do you want them to be attached to? The second way is you click on a combiner and you override it. Say, I'm overriding this material with this. And then the third way is the shading layer. I would recommend, if you're going to use this program moving forward, to bite the bullet and get used to the shading layer editor. It's a little bit frustrating when you first come to it. It can be a little bit clumsy, but it's actually way cleaner than mix and matching overrides and then assigning things to original geometry and then deciding you want to change it later. Of course, if you're just doing a turntable of a scene and you've just got one shader or a couple of shaders or something that's quite small, then do whatever seems best to you. But by and large, if things run the risk of getting bigger, you're going to want to always use the shading layer. It's especially good if you're look deving something and then you're going to pass it to somebody else. You can just save out the scene with this and your materials and your object, pass it to somebody else, and it'll always work straight out of the box. They don't need to plug anything back in. So there you go. That's the third way to do things. We have a red, green, and blue duck. Let's just finish assigning materials to everything. So we got physical. So we're going to grab a dielectric for the water, okay? Let's see. Well, it should just be called water. I need to go back and check that I actually named it correctly, but let's just drag and drop this in here and see what happens. So there we go. We have some water. So the water is rendering now. And then we'll just give the bathtub a shader. Now we're not making any complex shaders here. We're just using whatever comes straight out of the box to keep it quite simple. We'll plug in a texture in just a second, but you can, if you want to, you have a diffuse and you can use a reflection together and then you'll make kind of a normal shader. They don't have a generic shader yet, which I'm sure will come in the future, but for now, you're going to add a diffuse and then you'll add a reflection together, and that will make your sort of everyday shader that you're going to use. So last but not least, we have the tub. Let's make the tub, I don't know, let's make him gray. So there we go. And then we'll just call it gray. And now we have our shading layer tub. Okay. Then we're going to drop this in there. All right. So that's it for just kind of assigning a material to things. But as you can see, it's working quite well using this. If you don't like the shading layer editor, by all means, don't use it. Like, go ahead, click on the object, override things, or if you don't want to do that, then click on the original and assign things that way. All of them are totally valid. All of them are okay. This is just my preference because that's just how I've got used to it. So don't worry about it. And as you can see, that now that this thing is rendering, we've made an image, we've made a ray tracer, we've made materials, we have our basic components, we're back to kind of the default scene that it sets up. But as you can see with these buckets going around, what it's doing is it's cycling and it's just showing you the image as it improves. So if you're using 2.0, you'll see up here somewhere, it'll say 1/16. What that means is it will start showing it to you when it gets to a 16th quality. It does not mean it will render up to a 16th, which might be your first impression when you look at it. Okay, so in the next chapter, we are going to bring in a texture, and then we're going to take a bit of a look at the lights and the ray tracer.